Good morning again to everybody. I will give a few seconds for the room to populate and to get our attendees up. We were at 100 before, so I'm hoping we get back there for the session we have coming up. And for those who were not in the first session, my name is Karen McDonald-Gale, and I'm the CEO at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. My hard work is over with the first session this morning. So my job here is really just to open the room, welcome everybody. And I am very, very pleased to thank the panelists today, and in particular, our moderator, who is Jewel Batchesing. And she is the director of the Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer for the Caribbean. She will be walking us through the session today. Our session is on considerations for using circular economy in biodiversity conservation. So we really are starting to drill down from what we learned in the keynote speech as what circular economy is and why it's important, to why it's important for us and for the CBF in particular to consider it in our biodiversity work and conservation financing work. And with that, I am very happy to hand over to Ms. Batchesing. Thank you, and thank you all for your participation.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald-Gale, for the invitation to moderate this session. And of course, congratulations to the CBF on the work towards hosting this Finance Congress 2023. Of course, this year you are looking to advance your new Advancing Circular Economy ACE facility, which will look to work with the public and private sectors in order to really minimize and remove waste entering the marine environment. As I was introduced, my name is Jewel, and I work at the BCRC Caribbean. And the BCRC Caribbean is actually a waste and chemicals organization. So I'm really pleased to be stepping out into the biodiversity. I wore this hat many years ago, and really happy to be hosting this session, which focuses, as Ms. McDonald-Gale indicated, looking at circular economy and biodiversity conservation. At the onset, we have to recognize that the Caribbean region in particular is a biodiversity hotspot. If one Googles the Caribbean and biodiversity, you would note that there are over 11,000 plant species, and there is some endemism as well, 72 of which are found in this region. And in looking at circular economy, one cannot not mention nature-based solution, which really refers to those actions and policies that protect and manage and restore ecosystems that address those socio-economic challenges. Now, the guests we have today, we only have two. I know some of you may have been expecting three, but Nisha is unable to attend. So I want to start by giving the floor to Mr. Austin Shelton. And he's actually Dr. Austin Shelton, and he's a marine and environmental scientist serving as an associate professor and the director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grants. Mr. Shelton is working to revive island ecosystems and advance the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Together with the Office of the Governor of Guam, he is currently co-chairs the Guam Green Growth, the island's most comprehensive action plan ever created to achieve a sustainable and prosperous future. So I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Shelton, and he is in Guam, as I said. So please note it's very late or early, depending on how you look at it, in Guam. So we opted to give him the floor first. And he actually has a presentation that he's going to share with us. So I'll allow you to have the floor now, Dr. Shelton, and just test to see that your audio is working well, as well as that your slides are being seen. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Batchesing, for the introduction, and thank you very much to Ms. Gale and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for inviting me to speak today at your event. I'm really excited to learn about what's happening in the Caribbean side on the circular economy, because we've been really excited about this concept over here in the Pacific, and especially in our Center for Island Sustainability based here at the University of Guam. So I will pull up my slides here to share a little bit about how we've been approaching this topic of the circular economy, because I think for us islanders, this is a really important concept for us in trying to create a sustainable future for our islands. Now, I just wanted to share where I'm coming from, which is the island of Guam. It's in the Western Pacific Ocean. We're about a 3.5-hour flight from Japan. Over to the west of us and over to the east of us would be Honolulu, about a 7-hour flight, or 3,800 miles in that direction. And so we have established about in over 10 years ago now, the Center for Island Sustainability, which is our mission to help create a sustainable future together for our island region of Micronesia. So Guam is the largest and most populous island in our region, which is really only 30 miles long, 8 miles wide, with 170,000 people. But in our region, there's 2,100 islands spread across over 2 million square miles. And we have island neighbors such as the Republic of Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And we are always excited when we have the opportunities to interact with our colleagues over across in the Caribbean. So a few years ago, just in 2019, we took these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals pretty seriously and tried to figure out a way to implement them in our island. And we created a strong partnership between our University of Guam and the governor of Guam, Lulian Guerrero, to create our island's most comprehensive public-private partnership to establish a sustainable future. So the governor appointed 100 working group members from all sectors of society, from academia, from the business sector, from leads of government agencies and nonprofits. And we decided on creating an action framework that now encompasses hundreds of different goals and action items on all different topics. And these include things like no poverty and zero hunger. It has a cross thread of climate change action throughout. And we are now tracking this live on our dashboard called the Guam Green Growth Dashboard. There's lots of different metrics that we are now tracking, and anybody is welcome to come and see this dashboard to see how our local actions are contributing to our shared global future. But what I wanted to do for this short presentation today is to focus on one of the implementation going on for the circular economy under Guam Green Growth. So this is a huge challenge for us as islanders to think about two major things. And I think this of an over-reliance on imports. For Guam, we bring in over 90% of all of the food and goods that we consume. And then what we do with those goods is that we create lots of associated waste products. And then for us in Guam, our waste management strategy is very expensive. And it's not very innovative at the moment because we dig holes in the ground on our small islands, we fill it up with trash, and then of course one day we will run out of space if we keep doing it this way. So this is what we were thinking of when we saw the comment, seeing examples of corporations like Philips, for example, starting to sell light instead of light bulbs, or the Herman Miller chairs having continuously recycled reusable parts, or Apple using continuously recyclable products or components in their computers and phones. What we really found was that islands were actually original circular economies, that it wasn't just about electronics and products like that, but our people were living here in Guam for nearly 4,000 years, and we continued to thrive by using circularity. So we're trying to think about not things like light bulbs and chairs, which we're not currently manufacturing on a large scale on our island, but to think in a way that our people can get a piece of the green economy, to own a piece of the green economy by looping back to circular practices. And so the way that we came up with this, which I think may be similar to the center that I'm hearing about with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, that we're really excited to learn more lessons and share on those, is that we created perhaps a similar center, maybe a smaller scale, but we've opened up the Guam Green Growth Circular Economy Makerspace and Innovation Hub last year, which is now a place for artists and entrepreneurs to come into this space called the Chamorro Village, which is a business incubator space. And they have access, these entrepreneurs and artists, to different power tools, to equipment such as 3D printers, CNC routers, laser cutters, different small power tools. We also have an array of precious plastic machines which can shred, extrude, melt plastics 2 and 5. Version 4 machines where you can melt plastics into half the sheet of a plywood, the same size as a plywood, half the sheet of that, or 2x4 beams and other brick molds and things of that sort. And then it's also an innovation hub where we host workshops and classes on things like it could be turning invasive bamboo into new products, turning discarded plastic, discarded lumber, for example, into new art frames. Or you can learn more technical things like using a laser cutter, using those CNC routers, and how to design and operate that machinery. So we have a whole variety of different things going on in this Circular Economy Makerspace and Innovation Hub. But for the purposes of this conservation in this presentation, so I wanted to share that we're not just thinking about simply waste products, but we're also trying to loop in a response to invasive species into the circular economy. So for example, we have this invasive vine called the chain of love that smothers lots of our native vegetation. If you're passing by just the side of the road, you can see these pretty pink flowers, but the vine is actually choking that native vegetation. So we have a program called the Guam Green Growth Conservation Corps, another one of our implementation projects, where we actually went out and harvested some of this invasive species. And it's really labor intensive because you have to dig these tubers out of the ground in order to stop and kill the vine. And so this could be an endless task to be pulling these invasive species out of the ground. So we challenged our conservation corps and some of the entrepreneurs that are members at the Makerspace to come up with some products that would incentivize landowners to clear these things off of their land and perhaps make a green industry product that can be sold to the local market. So some of the ideas that they came up were things like soaps and bath bombs were one of the things that they created from this chain of love. They also broke down some of those tubers, boiled them, and turned it into a textile dye. We also found out that you can safely eat the chain of love leaves, and they turned it into a new pesto recipe, and so forth. And so this was a really great workshop, and some of these products are still being sold at our makerspace today. Another thing that we have that's invasive and a threat to our biosecurity and the biodiversity is invasive bamboo. So bamboo plugs up a lot of our rivers, and many of the species are not native. And when heavy rains come, it blows out large sections of our riparian or river areas. So we're harvesting some of this bamboo, and it can be turned into a whole bunch of new products in the maker space, like instruments or jewelry or purses. And then we're also working with our new School of Engineering at our university to turn it into a new building material. So that would be the next step for these examples. And then if you're in this Circular Economy Makerspace and Innovation Hub as a member, as an entrepreneur, you can take your products that you create and then sell it on consignment in our demonstration store. And we have access to business development experts that help you start a marketing plan, get your business license, and grow out your business idea. And we want you to get so good that you leave our space and you open up your own store and contribute to our growing green economy here in the island. So that's how we're taking a practical approach to the circular economy here in Guam. And I'd love to interact with more of you and learn how the Pacific and the Caribbean can continue to work together on these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Shelton, for that very, very interesting presentation. I mean, just a few highlights from it. Of course, you've stressed it at the start and the end of your presentation as it relates to the sharing of experiences. And this is very important. You know, we talk about South-South cooperation, but maybe, as I always say, maybe a new term needs to be coined about East-West collaboration as well. You've highlighted several points as it relates to public-private partnerships, you know, collaborations with the private sector, the university, involving academia, so that the science is always part of the discussion. And of course, the links to the Sustainable Development Goals and achieving not only one, but several of them through your actions. Of course, the highlight has to be that circular economy makerspace. I hope I got that correct. Really trying to incentivize entrepreneurs to think outside of the box and of course create a nexus between not only biodiversity but also waste management, which of course is very interesting for myself. So it really is good to see. Curious to taste that pesto from those chain of love leaves. I wonder if it is tantamount to basil or basil, as we say. And of course, I do like the last part where you closed off and said that it's not only about trying to encourage them to have a safe space to operate in, but you actually want them to go out on their own and incentivize them through development of business plans and understanding that a business model is very important in this type of capitalist world that we live in. So thank you very much. I will now move on to our second presenter. The modality for this, I should have said at the start, is that we'll allow the two presenters to share their presentations and then we'll invite the question and answer session. Sorry about not mentioning that. So it's my pleasure, not only in this capacity, but because I actually know Derek Lockpat from a previous his previous work at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. He's a business consultant and circular economy specialist who believes strongly in impact, efficiency, and balance. Aside from recently launching 3 startup companies, he has 2 decades of experience at senior levels in several sectors across the Caribbean. So, Mr. Lockpat, absolute pleasure. Please, you have the floor. Do you have a presentation?
Yes.
So you can share and just test your audio, make sure we're seeing the slides, and then you can proceed. Thank you.
Sure. Just briefly, just to say good morning to all. Welcome to the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund's Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress. And a thank you for the introduction, Joel. Happy that you are the moderator, and I hope people are okay with me using first names. Really pleased for the invitation from Karen, and thanks to Carolyn. And that presentation from Mr. Christopher Corbin this morning was spot on. I think he set the tone for the entire 2-day event. So, and I'm of course very happy to share the stage with Austin, Dr. Shelton. Let me go to presentation mode, and it's a very brief presentation. But before we start, I have a confession to make. Joel would have mentioned that I had about 20 years experience and heavy background in business. I've actually been running companies for about 20 years now. And some of them as large as, you know, over 800 people across 6 different countries, etc. And I will confess that I have been a part of the problem that has contributed to some of the issues we're seeing today, not just the environmental problems, but also the social and the economic problems. Because I can tell you, in my capacity as a CEO for all of those companies or senior person, I was bent on just focusing on delivering on the bottom line, the financial bottom line for all of these companies. Things that happen outside of the borders of the business, we were not too concerned about. We did a little CSR, but that really and truly was literally, you know, not even a drop in the bucket. That was like water vapor. And I just saw an excerpt from BBC. I see we've moved from global warming to global boiling. So that's going to be an interesting conversation going forward. So the word or the term circular economy is interpreted differently. I read an article recently that someone did a check and there were over 200 definitions. I'm not going to go through all, but the one, and because I have a background and I'm actually actively involved in the development of the ISO standards for circular economy, which is happening at present, started back in late 2018. I'm going to use the one from ISO, which is an economic system that uses a systematic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by regenerating, retaining, or adding to their value while contributing to sustainable development. So it's fairly straightforward. And I'm in this presentation, I'm going to try to simplify things a bit in terms of the understanding, because when we speak about things like the environment, sustainability, circular economy, there's a tendency to feel like this is external to us as individuals, or external to our organization, or external to our country. It's not our problem. And interestingly enough, my journey to the circular economy started many years ago in Jamaica. I spent 10 years of my life there. And there was a study being undertaken, and I participated in it to understand why it is there was so much pollution. It was not uncommon, and I hope it's not the case today, to see persons walking with boxes of garbage, bags of garbage, and tossing them into the gullies. And anybody who knows Kingston, they have a fantastic drainage system. But when you look into it, you tend to see quite a lot of pollution. And this study came back, interestingly to say, overwhelmingly actually, that, and this was done across all sectors of segments of society, the attitude was that once it's out of my sight, it's not my problem. And I think that's something we all meet in our various countries across the Caribbean, and even our friends in the Pacific. So this is something that it boils back to our attitudes, the way we think, and why we need to change the status quo. So in circular economy, the idea is that, look, today's economic system is referred to as a linear economy, meaning that we're extracting resources, whether it be from the ground, from the seas, from the air, from the forest, etc. We're making stuff, all types of things, things that are of good value, but some things I think you would agree that they're questionable value. And we use them, but then we throw them away. And there's been a heavy movement towards more and more single use, or things that don't last very long. And for those of us old enough, I think we would remember that there are certain things that were made in the past, whether they be appliances or electronics, vehicles, whatever, and they lasted longer. Of course, you needed to take care of it. But today, you find that things seem to be engineered in a way that does not allow you, despite your efforts, to service them, to repair them, and to let them last as long as possible. So this linear economy model is clearly unsustainable, and it's creating a number of issues, not just environmental, but social as well as economic, because by us getting ourselves into these predicaments, it does cost money to fix it. So I referred to Mr. Corbyn's presentation a little earlier, and I think he was citing maybe 3 or 5 R's. It's actually more than that. And it starts with rethinking. One of the challenges with discussing circular economy with persons who aren't very familiar with it is that in order for it to make sense, you have to take off your linear economy hat. You have to, because it's speaking another language. And that's why that R is the first R because when people think sustainability and well, circular economy, the first thing they jump to is recycling. And recycling is, as you could see here, and this is in order of impact and importance, recycling is the last. And unfortunately, a number of persons and companies and even countries have jumped on this bandwagon. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have value, but it is not going to address the root causes of a number of the problems we have in the environmental problems, social problems, and the economic problems, all part of one system. So I'm hoping most of you would agree that if you don't tackle the root cause of a problem, you will continue to have that problem. So recycling, in a way, as well intended as it is not the solution or a sustainable solution or an effective solution to dealing with a number of the issues we're having today. So you can see, and I know Austin spoke to some of it and showed some great examples, repairing, refurbishing, but in before that, the rethinking needs to happen. Refusing in the first place, do you really need to have it? Do you need to use that particular thing? Is there not a better alternative? And if that be the case, how can you reduce it? The beauty about some of these principles is that these things actually make business sense. And you will find that when you dig into the principles of the circular economy, you will find that at a personal level and even at an organizational level, these things are not alien to you. They're actually things that you would you're familiar with, principles. So sorry, let me see what happened. Right, okay. So how is this relevant to the Caribbean? And I go back, I really am happy with the way the things that were in Mr. Corbyn's presentation. So there's also a bit of a tendency to say, well, we're small. What can we do? We're not the ones that contributed to the majority of the problem in the first place. But the fact is that we all live in this system. And regardless of our size, there's nothing stopping small island developing states, whether it be in the Caribbean or in the South Pacific, to take a leadership role to deal with the problem. Because we cannot sit around waiting for others to fix the problem. It's affecting us as well. And I believe that there's a way to take a leadership position. And we already seen examples of it and I will point out Barbados being one of those islands. The other thing too, why I believe that small island developing states can take a lead role in circular economy is that unlike the more developed, quote unquote, developed countries, they have a lot of unraveling to do. They have a lot of, they're much bigger. Their systems are more complex. They are so much more industrialized. To turn that ship is going to take a lot more effort. The Caribbean is leaner, lighter, much more nimble, not as quote unquote developed. And so I am postulating that we actually have an opportunity to leapfrog that process and become leaders in a more sustainable world and be an exemplar to the rest of the world. So benefits, what is in this for me? We spoke about resilience. And what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to withstand pressure, withstand economic shocks, social shocks, natural disasters, etc. More efficient use of our natural resources in the region, in our islands. Innovation, Austin spoke to this. Innovation is not necessarily futuristic or high tech. It's about different ways, more sensible ways of bringing solutions to things that are important. Improve distribution of income, because what a circular economy champions is less production, less consumption, more service. And I will argue that that then gives the youth, it gives the the more challenged sectors of our society opportunities to participate in the economy in a more meaningful way, and thereby raise standards of living across the country and even impact things like crime, which is a serious problem for all of us. It has significant positive impacts on the environment as well. Less pollution, less waste, less emissions, less toxins getting into our waterways, into our soil systems. And as I said a little earlier, increased food security, more local innovation, less waste, more resilience, improved standards of living, more employment. These are things that the circular economy, if applied properly, can result in. So how do we get there? So it's not about all of a sudden waking up and say, okay, I'm going to be more circular. It's one, of course, you need to understand what is required and be able to make very deliberate decisions. And this is where certain entities come into play. And I would speak to, I was privileged to be able to speak at the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute Governance Week a few weeks ago. And their theme was a circular future, a circular economy governing for the future. And what that spoke to is that leaders who, with their experience and wisdom, should see the bigger picture and should be in a position to say, look, this is what is best for society, best for the country, and help to move things forward in a very deliberate and a very strategic way. But I will also argue that you as an individual or your company or even your country, I will argue that you cannot be circular by yourself. You need to work together. So you need to collaborate. One of the points made by Mr. Corbyn a little earlier about governments and having to move things forward is true. But you need to, it is important to recognize that there's a lot of good work going on. People are focused on their projects. Companies in the public sector focus on delivering value, quote unquote, to their shareholders and to their customers. But in order to serve wider society, we need to take off the blinders from just focusing on our department or our company or our country and start to work together. There is so much overlap and gaps taking place across several projects across, let's talk about the Caribbean in our region. It hurts because you see the intent and the value of what they're trying to do. Then you see others doing similar things and they're duplicating and effectively wasting resources and not being as effective, because one of the challenges most organizations and entities have is resources. So if we were to come together where, this concept of 1 + 1 = 3, and to create that, I keep forgetting the word, but that multiply effect, the results are going to be significant. So it requires a multi-pronged approach at the individual level with circular behaviors, all the way to our governments through policy making, and of course, at the community and at the business level. But this has to be done together. Not easy to do, but it's what will make the difference that is required in what seems to be a very difficult transition. And finally, just to share some of the activities, and this is slanted a bit to the quality infrastructure, because at the root of all that we do, standards and quality should be embedded in it. We take it for granted, and we shouldn't, but it is highly important to incorporate that structure. Just like anything else, you need to have a strong foundation for it to withstand what will inevitably be challenges, doubts, etc. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lockhart. Sorry, I still find it hard to call you Derek, but I'll try, yeah. Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. So you did take us back to basics, and in retrospect, maybe your presentation should have probably gone first because you did that, telling us, a bit about the circularity economy. But of course, before you even got there, you made your confession. They say confession is the first step to getting repatriation and getting improvements then. So you made your confession that as a capitalist, in looking at the triple bottom line, you really focus on the money side and the incorporation in the triple bottom line of both the social and the environmental factors as well. Overall, now in retrospect, you can see that it would have made your organization even better because the investment in the social and the environment redounds the benefits over time. And you could have made that triple bottom line money you wanted, even though you weren't focusing on it. So thanks for bringing us back to the circular economy, explaining, that circularity is really trying to close that loop, as we say. We always use that loop diagram or infographic, and moving away from a linear or just use and dispose type economy. The next part you took us through was that looking at very key points about distribution of income and equity. And equity in the Caribbean region in particular, I'm sorry to be a bit biased, Dr. Shelton, it's my home. So, and I think it extends to you, is that it is a serious concern that the funds in the economy go to a particular part and it's not equally distributed. So there's a bit of, the economic resilience is not there. In looking at innovation, I did like, that segue you made about, we just had the CARICOM heads of government meeting, and a big focus was on crime, trying to bring in that impact of bringing these types of circularity concepts to the fore can even redound or, bring to the fore that crime can actually be reduced because of innovation, creating businesses, creating entrepreneurship. And as you wrapped up, you talked about the hard stuff, the policy making, businesses, communities, and behavior changes, which are in their own right, individually, very difficult to do. Behavior change in 2023, telling someone not to take a plastic bottle and throw it to the side of the road is still extremely difficult. I work in this field, and it's extremely difficult. So that overall, those challenges really tantamount to a difficult situation. But as you said, looking at the next steps, and I see you turn back on your standards hat, your last slide, focus heavily on the need for standardization and quality, and wrapping up there that we must also be global in looking at what our solutions are for the region. So thank you very much to the two presenters, Derek and Dr. Shelton. So now we will go to the question and answer session. So I'm going to have a look-see. And I think the first question is from, I do not want to butcher your name, but I would give it a shot, Ulrich Cross. And have you observed any deliberate cultivation of invasive plants once they are used for making money? How do you prevent this? I don't know if you had provided an answer. No, you didn't. Dr. Shelton, you want to provide a response to this?
Sure, we haven't gotten to that point where we've had deliberate cultivation of invasive species. I know that could be a problem in some cases where for biological conservation or removal of invasive species before there's been programs like bounty programs that you pay so much for a certain species, like if it would be a frog, or in our case in Guam, a brown tree snake, which is our infamous invasive species. So right now we're looking at plants like the chain of love and other invasive species. They're so prevalent around that it's easier to just pick it off the side of the street before anybody starts cultivating it for those purposes. So I think we're still a long way from that problem, but we'll address it when we get to that as well.
Thanks, Dr. Shelton. And invasive by nature means that they are reproducing quite quickly. So yes, try to get a handle on it, and then we can deal with the rest as it comes. Your next question is from Sam Tisher. I hope I pronounced that right. And he says, or she says, depending on that, Sam. Hi, Dr. Shelton. Thanks so much for your work and making time. As someone who has previously collaborated with Hawaii Green Growth, I'm wondering, A, if and how much collaboration you do with other regional organization initiatives such as yours, and B, If so, what are key lessons learned that can be shared regarding how biodiversity relevant authorities can work together to streamline processes to promote action? Person goes on to say, while protecting ecosystems and communities is essential, there are many threats that have a ticking clock, example, dying coral reefs, and there's often far too little capacity and too many regulatory barriers stymieing positive impact.
Okay, sure. For the first part, working with other regional organizations, we absolutely work with Hawaii Green Growth. We work very closely with them, and we adapted their model when we created Guam Green Growth. And today we continue to collaborate through the local 2030 Islands Network. So Guam and Hawaii are founding members of this network of islands, and there's several in the Caribbean as well. We're islands working together on implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and collectively creating a sustainable global future. And what's really great about working across our regions, and I think this answers the second part of Sam's question, is that we were able to share key lessons, and the mechanism that we do that through the local 2030 Islands Network is through communities of practice, which we have set up for things like communities of practice for them, and for other topics that the circular economy fits in well in all of the food, water, energy nexus type conversations that our islanders are having. And that's really helpful when we're trying to get through these barriers, like regulatory barriers that Sam mentions, because we don't want to be slowing down our work. Coral reefs are really important to us in Guam as well. So we, as a U.S. territory, we get to say that we have the most diverse coral reefs in the United States, with over 350 species here in Guam. But over the past just in the past decade, we've lost over a third of our coral reefs due to bleaching events. And so we're looking at many different things that we can do to speed up the process of recovery and to make sure our coral reefs are resilient as possible to the current climate impacts and the ones to come. And what's interesting, just real quickly on that point, is that one way that our circular economy makerspace is contributing to coral reef restoration is that in addition to the standard 3D printers, we also recently purchased a terracotta or a clay 3D printer. So we can design the clay tiles and use those for coral restoration efforts when we put those out into the ocean, and the new coral larvae can settle and recruit onto those. So that's when we can help with this technology.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shelton. Very cool comment there at the end regards the clay tiles, and the knowledge there that they need that cavernous type approach in order to get the polyps in. Very cool. We have a comment from J. Jupiter that I actually might take the lead to address. Is tire to fuel circular? Are there direct mass to liter calculations or engineering steps for SMEs or industry? So technically, the answer to the question is yes, it is circular in the sense that tires are generated from petroleum products. So if you are to go back to petroleum products, because there's a massive amount of fuel that can be extracted from the tire. What we've seen in the Caribbean is that the trend has been to going towards tire crumb. There are actually two examples here in the country that I live, in Trinidad and Tobago, where they are moving towards using the tires for tire crumb, and that tire crumb can then be used to make play mats for gyms or for preschools or even for outdoor sporting areas. And in addition, some of it would actually be used in the repair of roadways. It of course has to have the right mix because of the integrity, the chemical integrity of the actual tire crumb. So, because we have very high temperatures there, and we can cause issues with integrity. So I hope that answers the question. Going to the next, actually this one is probably a comment. At its core, from SVG Conservation Fund, at its core, the circular economy represents a paradigm shift aiming to redefine our approach to production, consumption, and waste management, indeed. The next question from SVG Conservation Fund. How can SIDS, particularly in the Caribbean, make this shift? So I'll ask Derek, you can take this question.
Sure. So absolutely correct. It does require, it is a shift in thinking. You know, go back to the point I made about rethinking, you know, clear your head, forget what you know, and allow yourself to be re-educated on you know, what I would say to be a better world, a better future. There are, aside from these types of fora, there are activities or organizations and individuals that are advancing different aspects of the circular economy. So you have people focused on waste management. You have, I was very pleased recently to be in a meeting with, and it's in Trinidad, a college who is actually created a school for circular economy and sustainability. And they are actively in the process of gathering, you know, public sentiment, gauging, you know, putting together their curriculum. And I look forward to seeing how they could get particularly our youth, who, of course, you know, the next generations, to be aware and understand and to embrace and actively participate in the circular economy. Outside of that, there are a number of projects taking place. I think I mentioned, for example, I'm working in the cocoa value chain in Haiti, and simple things, and this is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, not a tire pun, but where there are the cocoa producers and they buy the cocoa, they're making chocolate, but they have waste. The waste is the shell from the seeds, and they actually can sell those now to a soap manufacturer. So what we're doing is trying to make sure that is done using standards and quality. So it's done in a way that is manages risk, it's more consistent, and so on and so forth. Similarly, Jamaica, we're working on a project with the cassava value chain, where about 50% of the cassava is wasted, and there's some degree of circularity, but not a lot. But when we got into that room where you had the farmers, the agriculturalists, the processors in one room together, and we started to converse around circular economy, light bulbs started to come out. So taking practical approaches, whether it's at the industry level, at the school level, to get persons to experience circular economy, I think is where it will become most effective. And because reading it is one thing, listening to it is one thing, but actually doing it, I believe it has more impact. So that's what I would recommend. And I'm hoping that the ACE facility, I anticipate that ACE facility would be that under the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is going to facilitate quite a lot of that. And of course, have positive impacts on the overall biodiversity in the region. So practical approaches, my strong recommendation.
Thanks very much for that, Derek. The other areas I've seen, because the center is actually doing something on textiles, and my research has led me to the amount of waste we have from bananas, banana to make fiber, as well as pineapples, interestingly, because the heads of the pineapple, as well as the skins of the pineapple, are now being used to make fibers. So it's very interesting to hear that. The next question, I believe, is for me. What are the challenges you've faced in terms of poor quality of some materials, including toxic materials that are mixed with good quality materials that may impact the recycling process? And have you dealt with this issue? It's a work in progress. To answer the last question first, and I'll use an example because it's fresh in my mind, is that of end-of-life vehicles. We're currently doing some work on end-of-life vehicles, and what we're seeing is that the poor quality being mixed with good quality, or the non-recognition of the very high quality materials that are just crushed and thrown away. And the reason I'm saying that is because I just came back from Bahamas last night looking at end-of-life vehicles. What happens is that if you're looking at a vehicle, there are very many components. There's the batteries, the tires, the oils, the engine, the metals, the upholstery. And oftentimes what we see is bad practices where the entire vehicle may be crushed and you lose a lot of good quality material. So if you do a good depolluting of the vehicle, it can benefit you more as a business person. And there are also some microelements that are lost, like in the circuit boards and so there are elements, microelements such as cadmium and gold, which are completely lost if the process just allows you to just crush and ship. Okay, so the other part we've seen commingling is that of plastics, where you may not have beverage containers and other types of containers being separated, and that could also impact your quality of the process. You've really turned up the crowd today, Dr. Shelton, with your love vine. So the next one is from the CBF Secretariat asking,
Sorry,
hi, can we get...
to cut
Sorry.
you, to add to what you were saying as
Sorry,
well.
I didn't see a hand up. Sorry, I have the screen with many windows.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying as well, because that is actually what is preventing quite a bit of recycling recovery from taking place is the commingling. And even that's why the whole thing about compostable packaging is not actually working. And this is happening globally because it's incredibly difficult to separate. And most societies and the way things are made, it's very difficult to separate it. But I just wanted to grab the opportunity to point out one of the key principles of circular economy is design it with the intent to make it easy, whether it is to repair, to be able to separate it so that you don't have that commingling. And that ties into with the local innovation I spoke about. There's no reason why kids or even adults, I mean, I think even though some of us might be close to retirement, we still give value, but that brain power can be used to create innovations to help all of society with design in relation to how we do things. And that's why the rethink is so important. If we just continue to work with what we have, we're going to prevent ourselves from understanding we could do better. An example for those who want to look at, there's a cellular phones, of course, are endemic. So Fairphone, I think some of us know about it, but read up on Fairphone, F-A-I-R phone. They are designing phones that are easy to repair, that are easy to pull apart, and so on and so forth. And of course, you get into now things like extended producer responsibility, right to repair, and the EU, and particularly with leadership from France, is making a lot of headways in this area. So for those who would like to read on it, just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks very much for the intervention, Derek. Sorry that I didn't see you before. Like I said, yeah, I'm just trying to juggle here. So I was saying to Dr. Shelton that persons want more information on the Love Vine, cost of machinery production, marketing, etc. So I guess you can send that to the Secretariat directly. Yeah. Right. And then there's another question from the CBF Secretariat. Can you let us know what strategies were implemented in relation to sensitizing citizens on sustainability and circular economy concepts? I'm not sure if this was directed to the speakers or it's a general question. I don't know if the person can clarify.
I'm happy to take a
to
take a shot at this one. You know what's really great about well, first of all, the most outreach on sustainability and responding to climate change, I think is discouraging because it requires sacrifice, right? You need to turn off your lights, you need to walk more and drive less, you need to eat less meat. But when we're talking about the circular economy, I think it's a lot of opportunity that we've been talking about. There's this hidden resource that's out for grabs that we've been calling waste this whole time. But if you shift your mindset, all of these things we've been putting into our landfills or burning in incinerators, these are the new resources that can actually make you money and give benefit to you and your communities. And so that's the biggest thought leaders in the circular economy say there's a $4.5 trillion worldwide opportunity if we transition to the circular economy. And so when we were learning about this in Guam, we said, wow, how do we get a piece of that? How do we become part of the green economy? And so that's where we're trying to create new circular products ourselves and being able to be part of that transition and capture some of that opportunity. And so I think that's a really exciting part, is that this is a huge benefit, not just to our environment, to the overall economy, but for people as individuals, that if you want to be doing something good in sustainability, you can also be making money and benefiting for yourselves and your family at the same time.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shelton. Before I go on to the rest of the questions, I just want to acknowledge and welcome Chris Corbin. Chris works at the UNEP based in Jamaica. Chris, morning and welcome. I understand I wasn't able to attend that earlier session, but everyone keeps referring to it. So congratulations there.
Thanks, and sorry I took so long to join back, but I was
okay.
interested in hearing the number of colleagues on the ground experiences. So happy to be able to be back.
Sure, thanks very much, Chris. Good to see you. Well, good to hear you. Just a point on there you are. Hi, nice to see you. Just a point on what Dr. Shelton was saying too is that in looking at the circular economy, and you're just tying back to the start of the discussion and the link to biodiversity, and I go back to a point I made, was that we do have to look at nature-based solutions as important. And looking at that blue and green economy is very, very important. There's a nexus there as we talk about the triple planetary crisis. Looking at nature-based solutions will tie in biodiversity, waste and chemicals management, and climate change. So it's very important that countries start to think towards that. For the Caribbean region, we've seen that Belize has taken a leadership role with the Blue Bond initiative for their coral reefs, and it has been working quite well. Other countries that have taken these types of initiatives include, of course, Guyana, where their forests have been protected for climate change mitigation. Next question is from, I have quite a lot of questions, so I'm looking at the time as well, so I'll try to manage them. The next one is from the CBF. Okay, the Caribbean Examination Council has, of course, at the Cape level, the Caribbean Examination Council is our local examination council, Dr. Shelton. In green engineering, it seeks to prepare the youths for effectively utilizing sustainable practices in their professional careers. The course has been examined for the last 4 years in an environment where we are speaking to the circular economy, sustainability, and innovation. Yet less than 120 candidates have taken this course annually. How then, other than on fora such as these, will this type of knowledge meet the wider society? This is a challenging question. I don't know if any of the speakers would like to take it.
Sure. It similar to what I said a little earlier. I mean, I'm not familiar with the course, very happy to hear about it, but blending the theory and the practical, I'm sure Austin would agree, makes a big difference. I mean, in his presentation, you showed most of it was about people doing things, getting involved. But I will also caution that it's not about only beach cleanups. This is not to your presentation, Dr. Shelton. This is just generally what I see on a lot of posts. So well intended, but it's important for the students to understand root cause issues. And I think by getting people who are experienced to come into the classroom and go out and work, or for there to be some type of a partnership where well-intended companies who are not greenwashing or circular washing, or who just want to do the ESG tick the box thing, want to see a better future for themselves, their stakeholders, and of course the future generations, will get out there and work together and show them how circular economy actually can work through existing organizations. So it's not about environment being on one side and capitalism being on the other. It needs to come together. And through each and every entity, whether it's private sector, public sector, NGO. And to your earlier point, Joel, is about not only thinking about what your business is about and ignoring the rest of the system and the rest of society and the rest of the environment. How do we do that together? So that is the approach that I would recommend. Again, a lot of practicality, but working together, partnerships, sector, regional, and you will start to realize that we actually have more in common than we do different. And once you get beyond that barrier, and in the Caribbean context, you know, the Jamaican thing and the Guyanese thing and the Trini thing, put that nonsense aside and actually work together, you will start to see the exponential results come in. And hopefully the the chains of this narrow-mindedness and short-sightedness will fall by the wayside, and we could actually start to do something that is even more important than just delivering a better net profit at the end of the day.
Thanks very much, Derek, for that insight. Just to add to on the sharing of information beyond the, how can I say, the attendance at a particular level in a particular school, we have seen that many of the organizations in the Caribbean in particular, and of course, I have to make reference to Dr. Shelton, where there are platforms now for sharing of information. He made reference to a green platform that is set up to allow for sharing of information. For instance, at the center, we also have a Green Growth Knowledge platform that is being used as well to share information between and within countries. So those types of areas too can be examined if it's not formally taught per se in the school system. Next question is from Emmy Rodriguez Rancier. I hope I pronounced that right. What, if any, policies have been put in place to ban single-use plastics? I can take a crack at this. The policies that have been put in place to ban single-use plastics are, for want of a better word, ad hoc in most countries, where the governments have taken a national decision to ban a particular type of plastic. It varies country to country, and this is in reference to the Caribbean Basin. So you have countries that may have banned styrofoam, some may have banned straws, some may have banned forks, some may have banned plastic bags. So it varies country to country, and we really need to see a more concerted effort to ban single-use plastics. The next question is, sorry. Oh, sorry. Again, I have the window right over your. I should move it down here.
I just wanted to add to that. I was actually at the table when I was at the Bureau of Standards with a number of representatives across many ministries and agencies when they were deciding on this ban of single-use plastic food containers for Trinidad and Tobago. And I happened to be there by accident because the trade officer was on vacation. So I said, I will attend this meeting myself. And I'm listening to the discussions, and they were ready to pick the alternatives. But I stopped and I said, because I don't go in there assuming I know anything. I said, because what I heard a lot in that room was the word biodegradable. And I asked, at the risk of being rude, I asked the question, who here knows what biodegradable means? Because I'm not too clear myself. Dead silence. And that meeting, the direction it took was that, okay, you want to ban something, and okay, why? We want to deal with the pollution. It's getting into everywhere, into the waters, into the oceans, etc. Yes, of course. So, all right. So banning is one thing. How are you selecting the alternatives? And this is where the assumption was made that because something is called biodegradable or compostable, that it's going to solve our problems. What we ended up doing, when I say we at the time at the Bureau of Standards, is bringing in an expert from ASTM to teach us, both private sector and public sector, on what biodegradable means and what compostable means. Long story short, that was not passed because they realized that all you were doing is creating a more expensive pollution problem. You were not going to solve the problem. You need to really understand, one, get the knowledge, two, sit down with the right people and plan this out properly. Get all the key stakeholders involved if you want to challenge a problem. But you are correct. That's only one type of plastic. There are many types of plastic out there that is creating the problem. So it also comes back to the consumer as well. So it's a very complex problem. And when you look across the Caribbean region, as an example, a number of countries have taken initiatives, and there are varying degrees of success. But I think one of the more successful things I've seen is where a local supermarket chain made a decision to stop giving single-use plastic bags. And I was privileged to sit with one of the executives, and they actually suffered a loss in sales, and they've still held on so far. I think they need to do more, but it shows, to my earlier point, leadership. Boards, executives, policymakers have to get together and make some bold decisions to make a real difference. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Very, very good points. A myriad of points there. But definitely the leadership has to happen. But I also want to say that I think sometimes we as individuals, whether we're wearing our environmental hats or not, don't realize the power of consumerism. If we do not want to buy it or we do not want to use it, then there's no market, and that breaks the supply chain completely. And I think that's sometimes we don't recognize the power of the consumer in doing business. And for me personally, I mean, I refuse to use, I carry my bags to the grocery, and I'm always looked at in 2023 with a lifted eyebrow, but nonetheless, you know, I've taken that choice. So it's really up to persons now and really getting the information out there. But definitely when persons learn, a very good example for us in the waste and chemicals field is the non-stick frying pans. When we tell people about the types of chemicals that are in those non-stick frying pans, then they become aware, and then they will look for ones that don't have it, you know. So these are the types of information that we need to get out there. Good. So I'm looking at the time. Okay, I have, right, there we go. How do you see us going forward with reference to the changes we are reiterating here, where it pertains to climate change dangers to the islands? I don't know if any of the panelists want to take that. If not, I can give it a shot. I don't know if Chris wants to take a chance at this one. You know, this is sort of up his alley.
Yeah, could you, and the famous thing, could you please repeat the, question?
Sure. How do you see us going forward with reference to changes we are reiterating here, where it pertains to climate change dangers to the islands?
Well, I mean, I think it harks back, Joel, to a point that you made when you were talking about the nature-based solution. So, I mean, all of us have heard it. Climate change is the existential threat to all of us as islands. It's the major thing that we should be trying to mainstream in everything that we do from a social and economic development. I know some of us now are going through droughts, some of us have heavy rains, but I think it's really about now those solutions, like a nature-based solution, which are able to tackle these crises, pollution, biodiversity, climate change, in a more integrated manner. I mean, we spoke a lot about climate change mainstreaming and climate change in different policies and so on. But I think it's now really just about our whole development pathway, so that as we go about investment, that at the back of our minds, we need to consider how we're going to deal with water shortages, how we're going to deal with sea level rise, what sort of coastal setbacks are we going to need? How are we going to reuse wastewater so that it reduces our vulnerability to drought? So I think it just has to be something that becomes less of an add-on and really something that just becomes the way that we as small islands have to manage our resilience. I mean, it's inevitable. We can't survive otherwise.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yes, definitely. I think climate change has been reiterated as that is the chapeau, existential threat. But we of course have to make changes, and I think it can become, if we look at the supply chain, we can of course definitely break that supply chain, because a lot of the products that we use, the products that we are generated from petroleum products, which is the basis of climate change. But also in trying to mitigate, as Chris was saying, you do have that mitigation and adaptation happening simultaneously with some of the actions that we're doing. But of course, we need to do more. Good. Going to the next one, great presentation. My question is for Dr. Shelton with regards to the maker space and the promotion of CE products from invasives in the context of SIDS. How do you all influence consumer choices so that they actively want to support these products as opposed to traditional use of imported alternatives?
At this point, what's really promising is that we can't keep up with the demand for these circular products. So once we get them on the shelves, our entrepreneurs come in and make something. For example, they'll a really popular one. It's kind of funny that they like these rice bags. You know, you finish your bag of cow roast rice, and there's this one lady that makes very high quality tote bags out of it, and it's a real fashion statement. As soon as we post that on social media, people come in and it's sold out. the next day. But there's other products too, because I think Jewel, you're talking about banana trees being a waste product. There is a company in Koshrai in the Federated States of Micronesia nearby Guam here that blended up the banana stalks and started creating banana leather. So we can actually call it a vegan leather, green banana paper. Turned it into wallets and bags and notebooks and other products. And that became really popular too. And as soon as we get a new stock of those into our makerspace demonstration store, those sell out too. So I think for some of these products that we're making, the challenge is getting it to scale to meet the demand so that we can import less products, and also trying to minimize the green premium, right? We don't want the cheaper things that we've been importing this whole time, things like styrofoam or whatever else that we bring in and is detrimental to our ecosystem here.
Thanks, Dr. Shelton. On a follow-up note, the price point is similar. So for instance, on the bag versus the rice bag or versus a soap that you mentioned, is the price point similar or is it more expensive?
It actually all depends on the type of product and the labor time that goes into making these products. So some of it doesn't matter. People will pay whatever it is because it's so cool and unique that they just want to get it. And then other times, like for let's say the banana paper products, even though those sell out, we still need to figure out how to get the price point down from $15 per notebook to something like $5 or $6 that you would get with a regular paper notebook, if we wanted to bring that to scale. So it really depends on what the consumers are willing to pay, if it's cool and fashionable versus just the practicality of it and reducing imported waste.
Great, thanks very much. There was just a comment here. We have developed recycling program for islands working with NGOs. How can we help islands? I'm not sure if the person wants to refine it. There's one last question because we are close to noon when we have to wrap up. And this one again, I'll keep Dr. Shelton, you can stay on the floor. Thanks so much for your work and making the time. As someone who's previously collaborated with Hawaii Green Growth, I'm wondering,
I think we answered that one earlier.
Oh, we did.
We got that one.
Oh, yes, we did. Yes, yeah, sorry.
There's one from Ibrahim Abdullah.
Right. Where can the right to repair fit in? Sorry, from Ibrahim, where can the right to repair fit in the circular economy context in the Caribbean? At present, there are very few reputable repair shops for common appliances.
It's an excellent, if I could grab this one.
Sure.
It really fits into the heart of a circular economy, because by keeping things like appliances alive longer, there of course will be less importation for us, as we are net takers of goods and services. So by importing less, you have less emissions, less impact of ships crossing the waterways, impacting the seas and the marine ecosystems. You have less impact or drain on foreign exchange reserves. Then you also then start to create more employment at the lower levels of society to do servicing, repairs, and that ideally should be done with the manufacturers, which is what you're starting to see more and more of. So the big brands that you know of, and this is a little more prevalent in the healthcare industry with big medical equipment. But if you bring it all the way down to our stoves and cookers and ovens and this type of thing, refrigerators, you're going to find that more people are employed. There's less of these appliances being thrown away, of course, as you said a little earlier, Jewel, because what is happening now is our landfills are so full. There's actually a concept in circular economy called urban mining. So instead of mining for virgin materials, you can actually go into dumps now and practically find a significant amount of resources. So that is something that is very, very applicable to small island developing states. And I'm hoping to, through my own platform, to have conversations with these companies, including a place I worked for quite a few years, bringing in tons of appliances, electronics, and furniture rather into the Eastern Caribbean, and with no real regard for what happens to it after, I have to admit. So yeah, and that could be applied across the board to all durables, electronics. I mean, Basel Convention and their project with e-waste is fantastic. And it applies, I mean, to all electronics as well. So there's so much benefit to doing this, but making the transition is where we need to help governments, businesses, and individuals better understand and help them to move along a little faster.
Thanks very much, Derek. I always like to have a bit of an adage, but this one I cannot resist. I saw the term right to repair, and I think we live in a world of right to upgrade, because the affluence and the ostentatious behavior that we see is that, or sometimes maybe it's forced, because many people would say, oh, my iPhone is working slow now, I need to get a new one. So is it intentional from the consumer, from the vendor per se, that they force you to do an upgrade, preventing you from really wanting to repair? Because many years ago, a washing machine would last you 20 years. I have lived that life, where washing machines would have lasted me 20 years, but now it doesn't seem that way. It's made to break, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we have no more questions. I want to firstly, before I wrap up, I want to give the panelists the floor just to say a few closing remarks, and I can start again with Dr. Shelton. I'll give you the floor to just say some closing remarks, then I'll pass to Mr. Lokpat and of course to Chris.
Well, thank you, everybody, again, for the opportunity to speak here today. And I think the point that's a highlight for me in this conversation is just figuring out how to get people to transition to the circular economy is to focus on the opportunity. And I really think that it's endless for us in islands to be able to look at the different ways, stop thinking about waste as waste, and shift our mindsets to waste being resources. And then just remember that we have lots of traditional knowledge and ingenuity in our islands, that we were the original circular economy. So we don't have to wait for the examples of large corporations that are just starting to figure out the circular economy now. We can go back to some of these innovations that we had a long time ago in our islands and start adapting those and support the transition to the circular economy, which is really not just about doing the good thing, but it's also about growing our economy and benefiting us as individuals. So that's a really great great incentive to transitioning to this sustainability shift that we should all be doing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shelton. And of course, it was a pleasure to meet you remotely. And thanks for giving us, of your time, because I know it's very early or late there in Guam. Thank you very much. Just to say, one of the questions that came in after I said that there were no questions was a question about the contact information for the speakers. And I'm sure that the CBF will provide the contact information to the speakers. Mr. Lokpat, over to you, Derek. Yes.
Thank you. Well, just of course, a thanks again to the Korean Biodiversity Fund for giving me the opportunity to participate. Thanks to the over 90 attendees that we had. That is fantastic. I would just say 2 points. One is, to urge the CBF through its ACE facility to really have some meaningful projects coming out of this. I think we don't have the time to tip through this thing. We really have to have impactful projects, particularly directed towards the next generations, but not leaving out the existing ones. Because as I told a very seasoned economist a couple of weeks ago, who said this is not his problem, it's his children's problem and his grandchildren's problem. I said, absolutely not. It's our problem now, and we're seeing that more and more. And for those who want to learn a little more, I do have a LinkedIn page and an Instagram page for Circular Caribbean that is just giving you the basics, because that is where the conversation start. We have to speak the same language. So thank you again very much.
Thanks very much, Eric, and of course, good to see you as well. Thanks so much for supporting. Chris, I know you just came in, but of course, a few closing remarks from you. We did have a question. I mean, between yourself or I can take it as well. But do you see that, in your role at UNEP in Jamaica, have you seen that there's been an interest by Caribbean governments towards circular economy?
Sorry, you went silent on that. Just
Sorry,
at the end
gosh, it's raining. It's raining where I am, so maybe the internet drops. Sorry about that. I was saying there was one last question, and between yourself or I, we can take it. But the question is, are Caribbean governments interested in circular economy?
I think the answer has to be yes. I can't say anything else but yes. But it comes down to what I wanted to reflect in my closing comments. Well, first of all, to really thank Karen and the rest of the CBF team. It was really a pleasure. Just sorry I wasn't able to be here for the entire discussion. But I wanted to say let's not look at circular economy as just the latest buzzword, which there could be a tendency that we do, because there have been just so many of these buzzwords that seem to be the flavor of the day. But here is something that I think really offers an opportunity for us as small island developing states, as Caribbean islands, to really work and build on our strengths that we have and focus less on the vulnerabilities. So what we have control over in terms of our consumption, in terms of the need to engender the entrepreneurship, which we naturally have as a people. What kind of systems do we need to put in place from a government perspective that will actually drive that change? So it has to be this sort of multi-focus effort. We have to start as individuals, as communities, as consumers. There needs to be the private sector engagement. I think once we demonstrate that there are tangible social and economic benefits from this mindset change and from this transformational change in using circular economy, people will come on. They might come on dragging, you might have to drag them kicking and screaming, but they will come on once they start to see the benefits both to themselves individually, but then to the benefits for their own businesses, for their own communities. So it's just a matter of keeping, talking the same voice as Derek said, having the same vision that we all want to develop. And therefore, I think circular economy is one such pathway. It's not the panacea, but it certainly can help us on that road to sustainability.
Sure, thanks very much, Chris. And again, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in and joining us at this session as well. I know you've had a busy morning. It was just a comment came in for the question and answer. Poor designs and continuous use of these poor designs of industrial estates makes it difficult to benefit from the circular economy. So with that, I want to say thanks. Just to come off of a point that Chris was making, circular economy is a new buzzword. Let's hope it doesn't deteriorate or prevent us from moving ahead, because sometimes this happens with buzzwords or sexy topics, as we say. And circular economy can be achieved at an individual level, but of course we do have to look at the bigger picture with governments getting involved and policymakers, which is a point that Derek made, and doing that hard lift. And that is the hardest part. Legislation is very important as well, and getting persons to change their mindset, their behavior. I want to say thank you on behalf of the BCRC Caribbean for providing this opportunity to us to facilitate and moderate this very important session. And thank you very much to the CBF for hosting this overall two-day series of meetings on very, very topical and interesting issues. I wish you all the best with the rest of your deliberations over the next day and tomorrow as well. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ms. McDonald-Gale.
Thank you very much, Jewel. Much appreciated. I think that was an extraordinary session. We have time for one of my stories, which is that I did my master's in Norwich in England, which is not quite in the center of the country. And this was a little while ago. And when I moved around between the various countries, it was a course in environmental impact assessments. I found that I was drawn to the islanders. most particularly the Greeks in this case. The link between our islands is amazing. And I see it since then. I've seen it in all settings. What we know as islanders, others just don't know. And that's particularly for Dr. Shelton. I'm so glad you could join us and stay awake. Please get some sleep. I'm very happy that you are able to join. The CBF will be in touch so that some of what you shared will transfer to the Caribbean region as we continue to build the partnerships that we have across Pacific Islands. I think it is amazing how much you use your innovativeness, your indigenous knowledge, and I think there's a lot for us to learn there. To Chris, who spoke before, to Derek, thank you so much for sharing on circular economy and what comes next and what it means, sorry, for the Caribbean region. I have many things coming up on the screen. What it means for the Caribbean region and what we need to think about, and to Jewel as well. I think for us in the Caribbean, it's a real question of how do we make sure that we are answering the right questions. I think, again, Dr. Shelton laid the context. There's not necessarily a pulling down from what others are doing elsewhere. What works in the Caribbean, what makes sense in the Caribbean, and finding solutions. So I think we know the problems well. We're very good at discussing the problems. How do we move to the stage of really discussing solutions that we can move towards, that make sense, that are long-term, that are not project-based, that go beyond the one project and the testing and ensuring it that it works, to make sure that we're doing something that's long-term. That certainly is the idea behind the ACE facility and what we will be thinking about as we roll out the facility and the grants that will be given through that facility. So I am so very grateful that you were able to join us for the discussion. For those of you who are able to stay with us, we are going to go for our lunch break now. It's noon in the Eastern Caribbean, 11 o'clock in Jamaica. We will be back for a session about talking now about practical examples and uses of the circular economy at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern Caribbean time, which is 12:30 in Jamaica, and 1:30 US Eastern time for others using the time. It will involve a number of persons who are actually doing things in the tourism sector in Costa Rica, in Aruba, and we will also have a presentation then by the coalition, the Circular Economy Coalition for Latin America and Caribbean, who has done, for those who know, a very good paper on the work that's happening in circular economy and some of what's needed to fill the gaps. So please join us back then, check the website, check your email for others, and I think some of the instructions are also in the chat. Thank you so much for joining and for the conversation. You will get contact information for the presenters, and we look forward to the discussion continuing.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.